Consciousness is often presented as one of atheism's great victories. A century ago, the mind looked mysterious. Today, we're told, it's basically solved. Neurons fire. Signals propagate. Complexity increases. And somehow, experience appears. According to the dominant story, nothing extra is needed. No soul. No immaterial self. No deeper explanation. Just matter, organized cleverly enough to wake up. And yet, there's something strange about the confidence of this claim. Because consciousness is not merely one phenomenon among others. It is the condition for talking about phenomena at all. Every scientific explanation presupposes it. Every argument against God presupposes it. Every claim that only matter exists presupposes a mind capable of grasping that claim. So tonight, we're not asking whether atheism is true or false. We're asking a quieter question. Why does consciousness behave like an argument atheism didn't mean to make? Part 1. The strongest atheist account. To be fair, modern atheism does not deny consciousness. That would be too crude. The serious position is this. Consciousness is real, but it is entirely natural. It emerges from biological evolution, neural complexity, physical processes governed by laws of nature. There is no immaterial, mind stuff. No ghost in the machine. No metaphysical surplus. Some thinkers emphasize emergence. Others prefer identity theories. Others speak of functionalism. But the shared core is clear. Consciousness is what matter does when arranged in the right way. This position is defended by serious philosophers like Daniel Dennett, who famously argued that consciousness is not a mysterious inner light, but a set of cognitive functions shaped by evolution. Neuroscientists point to correlations. Damage the brain, experience changes. Stimulate regions, sensations appear. Alter chemistry, consciousness shifts. The conclusion seems obvious. If mind always tracks brain, then mind just is brain. So where's the problem? Part 2. What consciousness actually is. Before explaining consciousness, we need to notice something basic. Consciousness is not just activity. A thermostat is active. A calculator processes information. A computer can outperform humans in many tasks. But none of these have experience. Consciousness includes subjective awareness, first-person perspective, the feeling of what it is like to be something. You don't just process light. You see. You don't just emit sounds. You mean something by them. You don't just store data. You understand. This is what philosophers refer to as phenomenal consciousness. And here's the crucial point. No description of physical processes, no matter how detailed, contains experience within it. A brain scan shows electrical activity, chemical exchanges, spatial patterns. But nowhere in that description do you find redness, pain, hope, doubt, understanding. This is not anti-science. It's a category observation. As Thomas Nagel famously put it, there is something it is like to be a conscious organism. And that something does not appear in third-person descriptions of matter. Part 3. The explanatory gap. This leads to what philosophers call the explanatory gap. Neuroscience explains correlations between brain states and experiences. But correlation is not identity. Knowing when consciousness occurs is not the same as knowing why it exists at all. You can map every neural firing associated with pain. But that map is not painful. You can describe the physics of light. But that description is not luminous. No amount of structural explanation gives you subjectivity. Even thinkers committed to naturalism often admit this. They say, we don't understand consciousness yet, but we will. But notice what's being assumed. That consciousness is the kind of thing that should be explainable in purely physical terms. That assumption is rarely examined. Part 4. Evolution and the problem of trust. Atheism usually turns to evolution to explain consciousness. The story goes like this. Consciousness evolved because it conferred survival advantages. It helped organisms. navigate environments, anticipate threats, coordinate behavior. That sounds reasonable. But here's the tension. Evolution selects for useful behavior, not for true beliefs. A belief can be false and still help you survive. If consciousness is shaped entirely by survival pressures, then its primary function is not truth, but fitness. This creates a philosophical problem raised forcefully by Alvin Plantinga. If naturalism and evolution are both true, then our confidence in human reason is undercut. Because the very faculties we use to argue for atheism are explained in a way that gives us no reason to trust them as truth-oriented. Atheism must say, our minds are products of blind processes. Those processes care about survival, not truth. Yet our conclusions about reality are reliable. That is not a contradiction, but it is a tension. And consciousness sits right at the center of it. Part 5. There is another feature of consciousness that matter does not have. Intentionality. Thoughts are about things. You think about tomorrow. You fear an outcome. You imagine possibilities that don't exist. Atoms are not about anything. Neurons are not of something. Electrical signals do not refer beyond themselves. But thoughts do. Meaning is not located in physical structure. You can duplicate the physical form of a sentence. But meaning depends on understanding, not arrangement. This aboutness is not a physical property like mass or charge. And yet it is central to consciousness. So atheism must explain how. Meaning arises from matter. Reference arises from non-reference. Understanding emerges from blind causation. Not just in principle, but in actuality. Part 6. Why consciousness doesn't behave like an accident. Here's where the argument turns. If consciousness were merely an accidental byproduct of matter, we would expect it to behave like an accident. Unstable. Ephemeral. Unreliable. But instead, consciousness seeks truth, recognizes logic, asks ultimate questions, reflects on its own existence. It doesn't just react. It evaluates. It doesn't just experience. It judges. It doesn't just survive. It wonders whether survival matters. This is not what blind processes look like when left to themselves. Atheism relies on consciousness to do philosophy, but explains consciousness in a way that makes philosophy suspect. Part 7. This is not a God of the gaps. At this point, a misunderstanding often appears. This is not an argument that says, science hasn't explained consciousness yet. Therefore God. That would be shallow. The real question is deeper. What must reality already be like for consciousness to exist at all? Not what caused it. Not how it functions. But what kind of universe can contain subjectivity, meaning, rational reflection. A purely material universe has no place for first-person perspective. Matter has no inner life. So if consciousness exists, and it undeniably does, then reality contains something that cannot be captured by physical description alone. That doesn't prove God. But it does destabilize strict materialism. Part 8. The quiet metaphysical shift. Here's the quiet move atheism doesn't notice it's making. To argue against God, atheism must trust reason, logic, evidence, conscious reflection. But to explain consciousness, atheism reduces all of these to products of non-rational forces. This creates an asymmetry. Consciousness is treated as mechanistically explainable when convenient, normatively authoritative when arguing. It is minimized metaphysically, but elevated epistemically. That's an unstable position. Either consciousness is trustworthy because reality is already aligned with mind and reason, or consciousness is an accident, and our confidence in it is unjustified. You can't have both. Part 9. Why theism expects consciousness. Notice something important. Theism does not treat consciousness as a surprise. If reality is grounded in mind, then minds within reality make sense. If reason is fundamental, then rational creatures are expected. If meaning is not an illusion, then meaning-seeking beings are not anomalies. This doesn't prove theism true. But it does show something striking. Consciousness fits more comfortably in a reality where mind is fundamental than in one where mind is accidental. Atheism didn't mean to make this argument. But consciousness keeps pointing in that direction. Part 10. The unintended consequence. The more atheism takes consciousness seriously, the harder its metaphysics become. If consciousness is dismissed, atheism loses credibility. If consciousness is affirmed, atheism inherits deep explanatory burdens. Either way, consciousness refuses to stay quiet. It won't behave like mere matter. It insists on meaning, on reason, on truth. And those are not neutral features of a universe. Conclusion: the question that remains. Consciousness may not prove God. But it does something more unsettling. It exposes a mismatch between what atheism uses and what it allows. A mindless universe can produce behavior. But consciousness is more than behavior. It is awareness, understanding, judgment, wonder. And perhaps the strangest thing of all is this. Atheism depends on consciousness to deny God, while explaining consciousness in a way that makes such denial questionable. That is why consciousness behaves like an argument atheism didn't mean to make. And why it remains one of the most unresolved questions in modern thought.